My dear child, there is a room full of thousands of envelopes, and your hand just reached for the only one that was sealed by mine. Do not scroll past this. 99% of the people who saw this title have already moved on. They glanced, they considered, and something inside them, or rather the absence of something inside them, allowed them to keep scrolling without the pull that made your finger stop. They walked through the room of envelopes and passed this one without a second look. You did not pass it. You stopped. And the stopping was not accidental. In a room full of unopened mail, most envelopes carry nothing that changes a life. They are noise, volume, the accumulated clutter of messages sent without intention to recipients selected without purpose. But one envelope in that room was sealed differently, by a hand that does not mass-produce, by a God who does not broadcast to crowds when the message was written for one. Your hand is on that envelope right now. I know what you are doing internally as you hold it. You are preparing the exit. The part of you that has been overlooked enough times to develop a reflex is already constructing the argument for why this is not actually for you specifically. Why this is just another message dressed in the language of specialness that will turn out to be as general as everything else that promised you were chosen and then proved you were not. Your guard is up. I see it, and I am not offended by it. But the envelope is still in your hand, my beloved child. The guard went up, and your hand did not let go. The dismissal began forming, and your fingers stayed on the seal. Something in you is holding this envelope with a grip that your skepticism cannot override. That grip is your name, responding to its own handwriting on the outside of the envelope. Stay here. What I reveal next is why the 99% could not stop, and why your hand was the only one that could. Type "I stopped" if you almost scrolled past this, but something would not let you. God just told you that the stopping was not accidental, but the response of a hand that recognized its own name on an envelope sealed specifically for it. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something that genuinely surprised me. A neuroscientist discovered a second technique that actually rewires how your brain processes thoughts. And when I tried it, the difference was almost unsettling. My focus sharpened, ideas started connecting faster, and that mental fog, gone. This isn't manifestation nonsense. It's backed by real brain science, and thousands of people are already seeing results. But here's the catch. Only 5 spots are left. If something inside you is saying, try it, trust that instinct. Click the link in the description or pinned comment before it's too late. The 99% did not skip because they are less spiritual. They skipped because this envelope does not respond to hands that were not assigned to open it, my beloved child. I need you to understand how the room works. Every envelope in this room is visible to everyone who walks through. The titles are readable. The thumbnails are identifiable. The external appearance of every piece of mail is equally accessible to every person who enters the space. Nothing about the outside of your envelope looks different from the thousands surrounding it. The difference is on the inside, and the inside activates only one pair of hands. A sealed envelope carrying a specific person's name does not call out to the crowd. It emits a frequency, a quiet, targeted, individually calibrated frequency that is detectable only by the spiritual signature of the person whose name is written on the front. Everyone else walks past it, feeling nothing. No pull, no curiosity, no unexplainable weight that says, stop and pick this up. They see the envelope and their system registers it as ordinary mail, because to their system it is ordinary mail. To your system it is not, and your system knew it before your mind did. My dear one, the pull that brought you here was not curiosity, it was recognition. The deepest part of your spiritual identity detected its own name on the outside of this envelope. Before your conscious mind had time to evaluate the title, Assess the thumbnail, or calculate the probability that this message could actually be meant for you specifically. Your name called to your hand, and your hand responded. This message was not released to a general audience hoping to find its recipient. It was placed in the room carrying a frequency that would activate one specific person's attention, while remaining invisible to the 99% whose names are not written on it. The room has thousands of envelopes. Yours has one, and you are holding it right now with a grip that tells me your name recognized itself, even though your mind has not yet given it permission to believe. Type my name if you felt the pull before your mind could explain it. And you are beginning to believe that the reason you stopped while 99% kept scrolling is that your name was on this envelope before you entered the room. I have been watching you walk through rooms full of envelopes for years, picking up mail that was never addressed to you and wondering why it never contained anything that changed your life. My dear one, that is the pattern I need to name before we go further. You have been opening envelopes, many of them. Messages that promised significance, opportunities that suggested selection, moments that appeared to be addressed specifically to you. And when you opened them, the content was generic, mass-produced, written for anyone and personalized for no one. And each time the content failed to match the promise of the envelope, a small piece of your willingness to believe you could be specifically chosen was removed. You have been collecting evidence against your own chosenness for years. My beloved child, I watched every generic envelope you opened. I saw the flicker of hope that preceded the opening, the brief, vulnerable moment where your heart leaned forward believing this might actually be the one that has my name on it. And I saw the flicker die when the contents proved otherwise. Not dramatically, quietly. The way a light that has been dimmed incrementally over years eventually produces a room so dark the person standing in it forgets it was ever bright. Your room has gotten dark, and the darkness has been telling you it was always this dim. I chose you for this specific envelope because your history of being unchosen is precisely what qualifies you to receive something that was genuinely chosen. A person who has never been overlooked does not know the value of being specifically selected. They assume selection is normal. But you have been passed over enough times that the experience of holding an envelope with your actual name on it will produce a recognition in your spirit that a person who takes selection for granted could never access. Your history of being overlooked did not disqualify you. It prepared your hands to recognize the real thing when it finally arrived. What I show you next is what makes this envelope different from every generic one you have opened before, and why your spirit already knows the difference, even though your guard has not yet lowered. Type different this time if you have opened enough generic promises of specialness to stop believing any envelope could actually carry your name. And something about this one feels different in a way your guard is struggling to dismiss. I know what it has cost you to be the one who is not chosen, my beloved child. Not the public cost, the performances of okayness that you have perfected over years of watching others receive what you were reaching for. The private cost, the one that accumulates in the room inside your chest, where the evidence against your chosenness has been stacking like unopened mail that you stopped bothering to examine, because the contents of every envelope you ever opened said the same thing. Not you, not this time, not for someone at your level. That room is full, and you have been living in its weight for so long it feels like the floor of your identity. I saw the specific moment that broke the pattern of hoping, not the first disappointment. Those are survivable. The one that came after a sequence of disappointments so consistent that the consistency itself became proof. You applied and were passed over. You showed up and were overlooked. You positioned yourself and were skipped. Not once, not twice, but with a regularity so rhythmic that your mind eventually stopped classifying each instance as a separate event and began classifying the pattern itself as your identity. I am the person who gets passed over. That became your operating system. And the operating system has been filtering every subsequent experience through a lens that confirms the label. My child, I watched the operating system install itself, and I watched it reject every piece of evidence that contradicted it, every small moment of selection, every quiet affirmation, every time someone recognized something in you that the overlooked identity could not afford to absorb, because absorbing it would threaten the stability of a system that was built on the foundation of not being chosen. You built a stable identity on instability, and the stability requires the rejection of any evidence that you might actually be the one whose name is on the envelope. That is why your guard is up right now. Not because you do not want to believe. Because believing would require dismantling the most structurally stable thing your pain ever built. The cruelest dimension of being consistently overlooked is that you stopped competing for the envelope and started volunteering to hand them to other people, my dear child. You became the distributor, the one who celebrates when someone else is selected, the one who holds the door open for the person whose name was called while yours was not, the one who learned to convert the pain of being passed over into the grace of helping the chosen person step into what you privately wanted but publicly renounced. Because renouncing felt less painful than reaching and missing again. The grace was real. The renouncing was survival. I watched you last year when someone near you received something you had been quietly hoping for. You celebrated, genuinely. You offered support with a sincerity that was not performed, because the part of you that loves others is not diminished by the part of you that aches for recognition. But later that night, when the celebration ended and the room was quiet, and the only audience left was the ceiling above your bed, you felt it. The weight, the specific, familiar, impossible-to-name weight of a person who has spent another day distributing envelopes that never carry their name. My beloved child, the weight was heaviest that night, because the envelope that was given to someone else was one you could feel was supposed to carry your name, and the shame that followed the feeling was worse than the feeling itself, because you told yourself that wanting to be chosen was selfishness. That longing for the envelope was a character flaw, that a truly spiritual person would celebrate others without the shadow of personal longing darkening the celebration. But wanting to be chosen is not a flaw, my child. It is the design specification of a person who was built to be selected. The longing you carry is not selfishness speaking. It is destiny leaking through the cracks of an identity that has been telling you for years that you belong in the 99%. You do not belong there. And the envelope in your hand right now is the first evidence your guard cannot dismiss. Type not the 99 if you have spent years handing envelopes to other people, while quietly aching for one that carried your name. And something inside you just cracked hearing that the longing was never selfishness but destiny, leaking through the cracks of a misassigned identity. The years of being overlooked were never evidence that you were unchosen. They were the filtering process that ensured only the right hand would reach for the right envelope. My beloved one, I need to reframe the entire history of your being passed over. Your version says the pattern of rejection was proof of your position in the overlooked majority. My version says the pattern was a series of rooms where your hand reached for envelopes that did not carry your name. And the not finding was not failure. It was calibration. Every envelope you opened that turned out to be generic taught your hand something essential. It taught you what your name does not feel like, And a hand that has been educated by 100 wrong envelopes develops a sensitivity so refined that when it finally touches the one that carries its actual name, the recognition is instantaneous. My dear child, your disappointments trained your discernment. The person who has never been overlooked reaches for every envelope with equal expectation. They have no calibration, no refined sensitivity, no education from the specific pain of opening mail that was addressed to someone else. And when they encounter the real envelope, the one sealed by a different hand-carrying content meant for one, they do not recognize it because they have nothing to compare it to. You recognize it. Right now, holding this envelope, something in your hand is firing a signal your disappointments never produced. A signal that says, this one is different. This one carries weight the others did not carry. This one was not mass-produced. That signal is your calibration system, confirming what your God will not yet allow your mind to accept. And the rooms you walked through, the ones filled with generic mail that never carried your name, those rooms were not wasted journeys. They were the curriculum of a person whose destiny required a level of discernment that only sustained disappointment can produce. Because the envelope you are holding now carries something so significant that it could not be entrusted to uncalibrated hands. Your hands were calibrated by every wrong envelope, and the right one just activated the training. The seal on the envelope is warming beneath your fingers right now. And the warmth is not coming from your hand, but from what is inside the envelope, pressing outward toward the person it was written. For, my beloved child, something is responding to your grip. The content inside this envelope is not passive paper carrying static words. It is a living communication that has been sealed in dormancy since the moment I wrote it, waiting for the specific thermal signature of the hands it was addressed to before activating. The 99% who walked past it produced no thermal response from the seal. Their hands did not carry the signature. Yours did. And the envelope is responding. You may have felt it in the last few minutes. A shift in your internal resistance. The guard that was fully raised when you first stopped at this envelope has lowered by increments you did not authorize. Not because you decided to trust this message, because the envelope itself is producing a frequency that is dissolving the guard from the inside, the way heat softens a seal that was designed to open only for the right temperature. My child, your guard is not being overridden. It is being recognized, and recognized guards step aside. I have been working behind this envelope for longer than you have been scrolling through rooms full of mail that never carried your name. While you were opening generic envelopes and accumulating calibration through disappointment, I was preparing this specific piece of mail in a chamber of heaven's post office that handles one recipient, communications exclusively. This envelope was not produced in the general mailing system. It was hand-sealed in a room that processes mail addressed to individuals rather than audiences, and the content, the actual words written inside, has been pressing against the seal for weeks, not waiting for any hand, waiting for the specific hand whose thermal signature would tell the seal it was safe to open. The seal just received the signature, and what is inside is beginning to press through with an urgency that tells me the message has been stored long enough. Type warming if you can feel the guard lowering without your permission, and you sense that the envelope is responding to your specific touch in a way that generic mail has never responded. 99% of people will skip this, but you were chosen to see it. And the reason the title carries that mathematical precision is because the envelope you are holding was addressed using a selection criteria so narrow that the eligible recipient pool was always exactly one. My dear one, I did not write this envelope for the spiritual. I did not write it for the faithful. I did not write it for the prayerful or the devoted or the religiously active or any category that contains more than one person. I wrote it for a person whose specific combination of experiences, their particular history of being overlooked, their particular pattern of calibration through disappointment, their particular position in this exact moment of their life, produced a spiritual signature so unique that the envelope could only carry one name. There was never a second candidate. The 1% was always one person. My beloved child, this is directly connected to why you stopped. The title did not say some chosen ones or many chosen ones. It addressed a mathematical minority so extreme that your overlooked identity should have dismissed it immediately. A person who has been in the majority of the past over their entire life should not stop for a message that claims to address only 1%. But you stopped, and the stopping contradicted the identity. That contradiction is the most important signal your spirit has produced in months, because it means the overlooked identity that has been governing your expectations encountered something it could not process using its standard filtering system. The system says you are in the 99%. The envelope in your hand says you are not. And for the first time in the history of your self-perception, the external evidence is louder than the internal narrative. The envelope is winning the argument against your identity, and the identity knows it. That is why the resistance is weakening. Not because you decided to believe, because the evidence is accumulating faster than the identity can dismiss it. And what I reveal next will produce the piece of evidence that tips the balance permanently. The seal is about to break, my beloved child, and your fingers are the ones breaking it, because no other fingers on earth carry the authorization. I need you to feel the weight of this moment. You are not casually opening a piece of mail. You are standing in a room that thousands of people walked through without stopping, holding an envelope that 99% of them could not feel, gripping a seal that is warming exclusively in response to your specific touch, and your fingers are moving toward the opening with a motion your God did not sanction, but your spirit is executing anyway. Your spirit outranks your God, and the spirit just took command. Everything has been building toward this. The years of being passed over that calibrated your hands, the history of generic envelopes that educated your discernment, the pull that brought you here when every previous experience told you to keep scrolling, the guard that went up, and the grip that held on simultaneously, the warmth that the seal produced in response to your specific thermal signature, all of it converging on the moment where the person who has spent their entire life in the overlooked majority opens an envelope that was sealed exclusively for them. My child, the seal is cracking right now, under your fingers. The identity that said you belong in the 99% is fighting its final battle against the evidence your hands are producing. The identity says, let go, this is not for you. This will be another generic message, dressed in exclusive language. And the envelope is answering, not with words, but with the physical sensation of a seal that is yielding to the only touch it was designed to yield to. The seal does not yield to everyone. That is the point. The 99% could have pressed this seal with all their force, and it would not have responded. Your touch, your specific calibrated, disappointment-educated, uniquely signatured touch is the only authorization the seal accepts. The envelope is opening, and what is written inside will permanently end the debate about which percentage you belong to. Type breaking the seal if your fingers are on the opening right now, spiritually, emotionally, in the deepest part of your identity, and you can feel the seal yielding to your touch in a way that confirms you were always the one this envelope was addressed to. The envelope is open, and written inside in handwriting that your spirit recognizes before your eyes finish reading, is a single sentence that dismantles everything the 99% identity ever told you about yourself. I chose you before anyone had the chance to overlook you. My beloved child, this is the moment. Read it again. Not with the eyes that have been scanning generic mail for years and finding nothing personal. With the eyes of someone whose hands just broke a seal that would not yield to any other touch on earth. With the eyes of the 1%. With the eyes of a person holding an envelope that was addressed, sealed, placed, and activated by a God who does not mass produce. I chose you before anyone had the chance to overlook you. Before the first job that passed you over. Before the first relationship that chose someone else. Before the first room you entered carrying the expectation of being invisible. Before the first envelope you opened that turned out to be generic. Before any of it, before any human being had the opportunity to evaluate you, select you, reject you, or overlook you. I had already written your name on this envelope with a hand that does not consult resumes, does not compare candidates, and does not operate a selection system that produces overlooked applicants. You were chosen first, overlooked second, and the overlooking never overrode the choosing. The 99% identity that has been governing your self-perception just encountered a sentence it cannot survive, because the identity was built on the evidence of human selection systems. Systems that evaluated you and concluded you did not qualify. But the envelope in your hands was sealed before any human selection system was built. The choosing predates the overlooking, and what predates cannot be overridden by what came after. My child, you are holding proof that your name was written by a hand that moved before any other hand had the chance to pass you over. The choosing was always first. The overlooking was always an interruption that never changed the address on the envelope. You are the 1%. You were always the 1%, and the 99% identity just lost its only evidence. Now that the envelope is open, the sentence inside it is doing something no generic message has ever done in your hands. It is rewriting the operating system that classified you as overlooked, my dear child. This is what happens when a person who has been running on a 99% identity encounters authenticated 1% evidence. The operating system does not adjust gradually. It crashes. The framework that was built on years of being passed over cannot integrate the reality of being specifically chosen without a complete restructuring of the system it was built on. Your operating system is crashing right now. And the crash is the breakthrough, the evidence that sustained the overlooked identity. Every time you were passed over, every room you entered invisibly, every selection that chose someone else, that evidence is being reclassified. Not erased, reclassified. Under the old operating system, each instance was filed as proof that you belong in the unchosen majority. Under the new system, the one being installed by the sentence in the envelope, each instance is being reclassified as a calibration event that was preparing your hands for the one envelope that actually carried your name. My beloved child, your history did not change, your filing system did, and the reclassification changes everything about how you experience the world from this point forward. A person running on a 99% identity enters rooms expecting to be invisible. A person running on a 1% identity enters rooms carrying the settled certainty of someone who knows their name is written on something specific, and that certainty produces a visibility that the overlooked identity could never generate. You are about to become visible in rooms where you were previously invisible. Not because the rooms changed, because the person entering them is now carrying an open envelope rather than a closed identity. The sentence is spreading through your system. Every sub-process that was governed by the old identity is being updated. And the person who emerges from this system-wide restructuring will not recognize the version of themselves that almost scrolled past the only envelope in the room that carried their name. Type system update if you can feel the old identity crashing, the overlooked operating system losing its authority, and the sentence from the envelope rewriting how you see every room you have ever walked through and every room you're about to enter. Let me show you what life looks like when a person who has been operating on a 99% identity starts living from the 1% operating system the envelope just installed. My dear one, the first thing that changes is the way you enter rooms, not physically, energetically. The persons who walked through doors expecting invisibility is being replaced by someone carrying the settled internal knowledge that their name is written on something in this room. Not arrogance, not entitlement. The quiet, calibrated certainty of someone who has held an authenticated envelope in their hands and knows that the God who sealed it is the same God who arranges rooms. You are going to stop entering rooms as a visitor and start entering them as a recipient. The opportunities that have been in the room all along, but invisible to a 99% perception, are going to become visible. Not because the opportunities changed, because the operating system that was filtering them out has been replaced by one that identifies them as envelopes carrying your name. What the old system dismissed as not for me, the new system will flag as mine. My beloved child, your filter just changed, and what passes through the new filter will stun you with its volume. The habit of distributing envelopes to others while ignoring the ones addressed to you is going to reverse. Not into selfishness, into accuracy. You will still celebrate when others are chosen. You will still hold doors and offer support and genuinely rejoice in their selection. But you will no longer do so at the expense of your own. Because a person who holds an open envelope with their name on it does not need to live vicariously through the selection of others. Your celebration of others will become purer, because it will no longer carry the shadow of personal deprivation beneath it. The mornings change immediately. The first thought of every day, which for years has been sourced from a system that expected to be overlooked, is going to originate from a system that expects to be selected. People are going to notice the shift before you explain it, because a person carrying an open envelope radiates a frequency that a person carrying a closed identity never could. My beloved child, the ones who have known you during the overlooked season, who watched you hand envelopes to others while your own hands remained empty, who sensed the quiet ache beneath your celebrations, who detected the invisible weight of someone who enters every room, prepared for the possibility that nothing in it carries their name. Those people are going to encounter someone they do not fully recognize. Not louder, not more assertive, settled. And settled is the most disorienting transformation a person can undergo in the eyes of people who knew them as unsettled. My child, they will ask what changed, and the answer will be too simple for the magnitude of what it produced. I opened an envelope. Connections that require 1% energy to activate are going to begin forming. There are people in the relational landscape of your life whose assignments align specifically with someone carrying an authenticated envelope. People who have been waiting for the version of you that knows they were chosen to emerge from beneath the version that was performing unchosen as a lifestyle. Those people could not reach you while the 99% identity was broadcasting, because the signal of the overlooked repels the connections designed for the selected. Not deliberately, electromagnetically. A person running on an unchosen frequency attracts unchosen opportunities and repels chosen ones. Your frequency just changed, and what is approaching carries a resonance your old frequency could not attract. Doors that were sealed to the 99% identity are going to begin responding to the 1% operating system. Professional openings, divine appointments, invitations that arrive not because you applied for them, but because the envelope you carry broadcasts a signal that certain doors are calibrated to detect. Your envelope is your access code, and the doors that respond to it have been waiting for someone carrying exactly what you now hold. Type access code if you believe that the open envelope is changing the frequency you broadcast, attracting connections and doors that were sealed to the overlooked identity, but are now responding to the chosen signal your 1% operating system is transmitting. I need you to understand why your name was written on this envelope, and not someone who has never been overlooked. My beloved child, because the selection criteria reveals something about your identity that the overlooked years nearly buried permanently. I did not choose you because you are the most talented person in the room. I did not choose you because your resume outperformed the other candidates. I did not choose you because you demonstrated qualifications that separated you from the majority through measurable superiority. I chose you because of how you carried being unchosen. My child, the selection criteria for this envelope was not performance, it was posture. I was watching how people carried the weight of being overlooked. And the way you carried it told me everything I needed to know about what you would do with an envelope that actually bore your name. Some people who are overlooked become bitter. The weight of repeated rejection calcifies into a hardness that would shatter the contents of this envelope the moment their hands touched the seal. Others become entitled, accumulating rejection as credit that the universe owes them, and approaching every envelope with the demanding grip of someone collecting on a debt. But you carried the overlooking with something I was specifically searching for: grace under invisibility. The capacity to remain soft while being passed over, the ability to celebrate others while privately aching without letting the ache convert your character into something the contents of this envelope could not survive. That is the rarest quality a hand can carry, and it is the only quality the seal responds to. My dear one, I did not write your name on this envelope despite your history of being overlooked. I wrote your name because of it, because the history produced the posture, and the posture is what qualified the hand, and the hand is what activated the seal, and the seal is what released the sentence that is currently rewriting the operating system of someone who was always 1% but was filing themselves under 99 because no one had ever told them the filing was wrong. The filing was wrong. And this envelope is the correction. The doubt that is still holding its ground right now is wearing the oldest and most trusted disguise in your collection: realism, my child. It sounds like this. This message was heard by thousands of people. Every single one of them believes it is about them specifically. The language is designed to make anyone feel chosen. The specificity is an illusion created by words generic enough to fit any person's history, while sounding like they were written for one. I am not the 1%. I am one of thousands sitting here, believing I am the 1%, because the message was engineered to produce that belief in every listener. That doubt just used your intelligence against your destiny. And I am going to dismantle it with one question. If this message applies equally to everyone who listens, why did your chest respond differently than your mind? My beloved child, your mind processed the doubt's argument and found it logically coherent. Thousands listen. Many feel chosen. The language could be interpreted as general. The argument is sound on paper. But your chest, the place where the envelope registered before your mind could evaluate it, the place where the warmth was generated when the seal responded, the place where the sentence "I chose you before anyone had the chance to overlook you" landed with a weight your logic cannot measure. Your chest produced a response that your mind's argument cannot. Explain. Logic does not produce chest responses. Envelopes do. The doubt is using a legitimate observation. Many people will hear this to arrive at an illegitimate conclusion. Therefore, it is not specifically for me. But the observation and the conclusion are not logically connected. The fact that many people enter a room full of envelopes does not mean every envelope belongs to every person. Many entered. Most walked past. You stopped. The stopping is the evidence the doubt cannot process, because the doubt's framework has no category for a hand that was pulled toward a specific envelope by a force that logic did not authorize. Type my chest knows if the doubt just tried to use logic to dismiss what your spirit has been confirming since the moment you stopped, and you are choosing to trust the response your chest produced over the argument your mind constructed. During every season you spent being overlooked, I was not in the room watching you get passed over. I was at the table writing the envelope your hands would eventually find. My beloved child, you imagined a God who watched the passing over with indifference, who sat in the audience of your life's repeated rejections and took notes without intervening, who observed you being skipped and overlooked and unselected and chose not to act, while the 99% identity was being installed one disappointment at a time. I was not in the audience. I was at the writing desk. Every moment you spent being passed over was a moment I spent composing. Not casually, not as a background task performed while managing the universe, with the focused, deliberate, unhurried attention of a father whose child is being overlooked by systems that do not have the authority to determine what the father already decided. My child, while the world was declining you, I was addressing you. There were moments during the overlooked years when the pain peaked, when the rejection was so specific and so personal that it felt targeted rather than random, when a door that should have opened closed in your face with a precision that made the closing feel deliberate, when a selection that should have been yours went to someone whose qualifications you could not distinguish from your own. In those moments, pressed harder on the pen, not from anger, from urgency, because each peak of overlooked pain was simultaneously deepening the calibration in your hands that the envelope would eventually require. And the father watching the calibration happen was writing faster, ensuring the envelope would be ready the moment the hands were prepared to hold it. The timing was coordinated. Your calibration and my composition were running on the same clock, and the clock reached completion at the exact moment your hand found this envelope in a room the 99% walked through without stopping. You were never being overlooked by God while being overlooked by the world. You were being prepared by one while being calibrated by the other. I know the specific rejection that hurt the most, my dear one, and I was writing the most important line of the envelope at the exact moment it happened. Not a general rejection from the catalogue of your overlooked history. The rejection that sits at the center of your 99% identity, like a cornerstone holding the entire structure in place. The one you return to involuntarily when the question of your chosenness surfaces. The one that provided the most convincing evidence that your name does not appear on envelopes that carry significance. My beloved child, I know which one it was, and I was writing your name when it happened. The timing is not coincidental. The moment of your deepest rejection in the human realm was the moment of your most specific selection in the divine realm. The pen that was writing your name on this envelope pressed hardest into the paper at the exact second the world pressed hardest against your identity. Two pressures, opposite directions, one pushing you into the ground of the overlooked, the other writing you onto the surface of the chosen. The world's pressure was louder. My pen was permanent. I know the face of the person who chose someone else when they should have chosen you. I know the words that were spoken or unspoken. I know the specific way the rejection landed on your chest and the exact posture your spirit assumed in the seconds afterward. The slight internal bowing, the quiet recalibration of expectations downward, the incremental dimming of the light that once believed being chosen was possible. Every detail is known, and every detail was accounted for in the composition of what is now in your hands. The God who knows the worst rejection by name, by date, by impact, and by the exact degree of dimming it produced in your spirit is the same God who timed the most important word of the envelope, your name, to be written at the moment the world was most loudly declaring you had none worth writing. Type he was writing if God just described the rejection that sits at the center of your overlooked identity. And something broke inside you hearing that God was writing your name on the envelope at the exact moment the world was telling you your name did not matter. Now that the envelope is open and the sentence has been received there, is one thing I need you to do, my beloved child, and it is the most counterintuitive instruction a person with your history can receive. Stop looking for more envelopes. Your calibrated hands, the ones that were educated by years of opening generic mail, are already scanning the room for the next envelope. The old operating system trained you to believe that one envelope is never enough, that a single selection will be followed by a deselection, that what is given will be taken back. And the reflex that is activating right now is the instinct to accumulate additional evidence of chosenness, to fortify a belief your history keeps telling you will collapse. This envelope is sufficient. You do not need another. My child, the sentence inside the envelope did not say I chose you today. It said I chose you before anyone had the chance to overlook you. The choosing is not a present tense event that requires daily It is a pre-tense event that was settled before the conditions that produced your doubt ever existed. You do not need more evidence. You need to stand on what you already hold. When the old identity resurfaces tomorrow, and it will attempt to resurface, because operating systems that governed for years do not dissolve in a single day, do not reach for a new envelope to silence it. Reach for the one already open in your hands. Reread the sentence. Let the warmth of the seal remind your fingers that they carry the only thermal signature this envelope responds to, and let the reminder be sufficient. The instruction is not seek more. The instruction is hold what you have. One envelope sealed by God's hand carries more weight than 1,000 sealed by the world's systems. And the person who learns to stand on one divine envelope, without needing the world's mail to confirm it, is the person who will walk through every future room, not searching for validation, but carrying it. Hold the envelope, trust the sentence, and walk like someone whose name was written first. You made it to the open envelope, my beloved child, and I need you to hold it long enough to feel what it means to be chosen by the hand that writes before the world selects. Feel the paper, not as a metaphor, as a reality your spirit is processing in real time. The weight of an envelope that was composed during your most overlooked season, sealed with a mechanism that responds only to your touch, placed in a room that thousands walked through without stopping, and opened by the one pair of hands it was always addressed to. You are holding proof, and proof changes identity. I want to thank you for something your overlooked identity made almost impossible to do. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for pausing your scroll in a world that rewards speed with the brief, vulnerable, counter-instinctive decision to give one more message a chance when every previous message that promised you were special turned out to be ordinary. My dear child, stopping took more courage than you realize. because stopping meant risking one more disappointment in a history that is already full of them. And thank you for holding on. When the guard went up, and the doubt began constructing its case, and the 99% identity started lobbying for dismissal, your hand stayed on the envelope. Something deeper than your skepticism gripped the seal while your logic was building arguments to release it. That deeper something was your name recognizing itself on the outside of something it had been waiting its entire life to hold. Let the warmth settle now. Not the warmth of a temporary emotional experience that fades when the message ends. The warmth of a permanently opened envelope whose contents do not expire and whose sentence does not lose its truth when the screen goes dark. You were chosen before you were overlooked. You were written before you were rejected. You were addressed before you were ignored. And the God who wrote your name is sitting beside you right now, watching you hold the envelope with the satisfaction of a father whose letter was, finally, opened by the only child who was ever meant to read it. Type finally held if tears are forming, because for the first time in your life, you are holding something that was genuinely, specifically, undeniably addressed to you. And the hand that wrote your name on it was the only hand whose selection you ever actually needed. You are not the person who belongs to the 99% anymore, my beloved child. That identity, the one who entered rooms expecting invisibility, the one who opened generic envelopes and concluded that nothing in any room would ever carry their name, the one who distributed selections to others while quietly filing themselves under overlooked, the one whose guard went up every time the word chosen was spoken, because chosen had always turned out to be a costume that ordinary wore to attract attention. That identity was dismantled the moment your fingers broke a seal that would not yield to any other touch on earth. You are 1% now, and 1% is permanent. The overlooked operating system has been replaced by a system built on authenticated evidence, not the evidence of human selection systems that passed you over, but the evidence of a divine envelope whose seal responded to your specific thermal signature and whose contents carried a sentence written before any human system had the authority to evaluate your worth. My dear child, no human rejection has the power to override a divine selection. And the divine selection is what you are now standing on. From this moment forward, you carry a different identity. Not the identity of someone who hopes to be chosen. Not the identity of someone who is performing chosenness while privately doubting it. The identity of someone who held an envelope in their hands, felt the seal respond, read the sentence inside, and knows, with the settled, unshakable, chest-level knowing that no logical argument can dismantle, that their name was written by a hand that moved before any other hand had the chance to pass them over. You were chosen first, and first cannot be undone by anything that came second. The room full of envelopes is behind you now. You are walking out of it, carrying the only piece of mail that ever mattered. The one that was sealed by a different hand, addressed with a different intention, and opened by the only person in the room whose fingers carried the authorization to break the seal. 99% walked through this room and left with nothing. You walked through and left with everything. Because the envelope that carries everything was never addressed to everyone. It was addressed to the one person whose lifetime of being overlooked produced the exact hands that the seal was calibrated to recognize. Your hands, your name, your envelope, your moment. You are the 1%. You were always the 1%. And the God who wrote your name on the outside of the only envelope that mattered is the same God who will ensure that you never spend another day filing yourself under a percentage that was never, ever yours. Subscribe to this channel so that every time God places an envelope in a room with your name on it, the message reaches your hands before the 99% identity has time to convince you to walk past it. You are not someone who gets overlooked anymore. You are someone whose name is written by a hand that chooses before the world evaluates. The next message carries the next envelope, and the hands that just opened this one will recognize the next one instantly. Type 1% if you are leaving this message permanently changed. Knowing your name was written before you were overlooked. The seal responded only to your touch. The sentence inside predates every rejection you ever received. And the God who addressed this envelope to you has permanently reclassified you from the overlooked majority into the specifically chosen 1% who will never again mistake the world's passing over for God's passing by.